Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica, continuing series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and we got some more Sega Saturn current core testing fun for you today. Because the core is now an update out, I've been getting a lot of comments about what games you should be playing, so every game in this video seems to work 100% as well as real Saturn hardware. So when you're thinking about what game you might want to load up and play next, you can use any of these examples to know you're getting one-to-one par performance with a real Sega Saturn console. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. It definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But Mega Man X4 is a super fun game. It's not my favorite game in the X series, but it is still a ton of fun. From the FMVs to the soundtrack to the sound effects to the gameplay itself, if this was not running on real Sega Saturn hardware, I would have absolutely no idea whatsoever. This game could pass my blind taste test. Hand me a controller, don't show me what I'm playing on, and you ask me what it would be, I'm going to be a coin flip as to whether or not I could figure out if this was MiSTer FPGA or real Sega hardware, which is absolutely incredible. Even though the core is not done and there's still improvements to be had, there are some games that just seem to 100% work when you play them, and Mega Man X4 is definitely one of those. And that is also awesome because even if this isn't my favorite X game ever, it is still like a 9.5 out of 10 as far as Mega Man games are concerned. I have beaten this on my own spare time on my MiSTer FPGA, and this was one of the earlier games that seemed to be relatively good, but there were still some issues in the sound effects being a little bit scratchy. Now, playing through this entire game, checking it out, everything seems to just be totally fine. And that's what you're going to find on the Sega Saturn core. The games that work seem to work really well. The games that don't work, you're going to obviously notice very quickly with some graphical glitches. But this is definitely one of those games. If you just want to load it up on your MiSTer today, you can have fun, you can see the ending. It doesn't really seem like there's anything wrong with Mega Man X4 whatsoever, but I depend on your eyes to spot any issues. If you see them, leave me a comment down below, or if it seems perfect, tell me down below as well, because I watch this footage a lot, but I am blind to certain glitches. But when you have 5,000 plus people watching, sometimes people pick up on things. But the Sega Saturn core is shaping up so well on the current core. It is great to be able to bring you a bunch of games that just seem to 100% work. And this is in the 2D department. Of course, we're going to hit up some 3D in a little bit, but even this scroll right here through this spiral staircase just looks exactly like it would on real hardware. And it is a very fun piece of visual trickery on the Sega Saturn and every other piece of hardware it uses. It looks so convincing, I absolutely love it, but Mega Man X4, totally playable today. Now, all of you have been requesting some King of Fighters footage. You wanted to see how this performed on the current core, and I can tell you you're already watching it on a Games That Just Work video. So this one, again, is one that you can pick up, play, and have an absolute blast doing so. Now, of course, King of Fighters 97 and the rest of the numbered King of Fighters games, as far as years are concerned, are available on the Neo Geo core. So this is not something that we didn't have a chance to play before. We've had Neo Geo on MiSTer for years, but the Sega Saturn version has some fun soundtrack elements that are arranged and just a few differences, but it's another example of 2D backgrounds and sprite work drawing very well on the Sega Saturn, and this is just one of those games that's an absolute blast to play, especially if you have friends over for a game night. You want to play some fighting games on your Sega Saturn MiSTer core, you could do a lot worse than King of Fighters 97. It's bright, it's colorful, and it's one of the better entries in my opinion in the King of Fighters franchise. 98 and 2002 are always going to be my favorites, but 97 is a close one. Tell me down below which your favorite King of Fighters is, though I feel like I'm going to get a lot of different votes on that one. But like I said, it's so much fun to see all of these games just working. From the background to the audio to the sprites to the inputs, there is nothing I can detect that doesn't make me think we're just playing on real Sega Saturn hardware. And I played an absolute metric crap ton of King of Fighters in my time. I've got the entire set on AES, the full run, and I just can't see anything here that doesn't make me think it's perfect. But go ahead and listen to the sound, get a taste of that, and I will be right back.
Round 1. Ready, go!
The sound lines, the sound effects, everything there just sounds good, but on some games, if you notice the Sega Saturn core has low audio, that is because on some games it just has low audio. You may need to turn your volume up, at least at the time of doing this voiceover. That was the current situation with the Saturn core. But moving on to Night Striker, a game that has 3D pad support, and we do have that in the core as well. This was another game that didn't used to work outside of a few cores ago, but now it just seems to be 100% there for me as far as the visuals and performance are concerned. If you've never played Night Striker, this is, in my opinion, the best 2D sprite scaling game Taito ever made, but I am very biased because this just does everything I love. The neon colors, the vibe, the cyberpunk future, the sort of shmup aspect gameplay to it. It's basically like Space Harrier made by Taito, and I think they did it better than Sega. And this is another one. I finished it on the current core, and big thanks to Andy D for helping me with the captures this week on some of these videos. You can just see the credits scroll on Night Striker. It only takes like 20-25 minutes to play the entire game, which is great if you just want to sit down and play like a half an hour of Saturn on your MiSTer FPGA. Night Striker is definitely a game you should check out. And it's another game that in the captures, I cannot see anything wrong with it whatsoever. All of the transitions are working, all of the sprites and background layers are non-corrupted, the sound and sound effects are great as well. I would give you a listen to this one, but a lot of times, a lot of Zuntata music throws up copyright strikes on YouTube. There's not really much I can do about that. Night Striker is one I've had issues with in the past, but I can tell you right now this has got one of the best soundtracks of any Taito game ever made, and it 100% just sounds crystal clear and perfect on the current Sega Saturn core. And it wasn't that long ago where sound basically didn't exist, or there'd be a lot of clicks, pops, and whistles in the audio. Now with the games the sound works, I'd say 9 out of 10 times the sound is going to be exactly as you would expect it to. And as VDP1 and VDP2 push all of these scrolling sprites into your screen at once, there's nothing to my eye that looks anything other than like playing this on a real Sega Saturn, and I do own it on a real Sega Saturn. But we've talked enough about 2D games, let's move over to 3D, and a lot of you have been asking me to check out Need for Speed. This came out on the 3DO, and that's still my favorite version, but the Sega Saturn version is no slouch itself. And the best part about this is we get both a mix of FMVs as well as 3D rendering, because it wasn't that long ago that FMVs would freeze the core and you'd have to beat start like it owed you money just to get into the game. But as an example of 3D on the current core, I have played this game recently, I checked it out, and I will say that the performance, frame rate, handling, all of the visuals here just seem like you're playing Need for Speed on a real Sega Saturn console. Now I'm not saying Need for Speed is aged super well, there's definitely better racing games to play on the Sega Saturn, but this is one that you guys kept asking to see as a viewer request, so that's why it is here today. And I'm not knocking Need for Speed, it's a ton of fun, but you put it up against something like Sega Rally, you're probably going to want to play Sega Rally first. But if you're looking for more new racing games to play on the current Saturn core that just seem to work, you could do a lot worse than Need for Speed. Just be aware that when you change the camera around, hitting the wall is definitely something that's going to happen to you. But this is a really fun test of all of the VDP chips working in tandem, because you can see that skybox undulates and rotates in the background as these polygons, or well, technically quadrilaterals, draw onto the screen. And this is a game last time I tried to make it work, it basically either froze or was so visually glitched you could barely see anything in the capture. Andy D is playing this one today, thanks again to him, and this just looks golden. I don't see any issues, it looks like a Sega Saturn, which is to say 3D, but rough for the generation. But as we move on to another course, something that doesn't have as many hills, you'll see that skybox still has that parallax effect in the background, and it looks just like it does on real hardware. It's an interesting example of Need for Speed. They changed up the heads-up display and made it look more arcadey than the other releases on PlayStation 1 and 3DO, but it still has the same Need for Speed handling engine for the most part, so it definitely feels way more simmy on the Gran Turismo side of things than it does feel like something like Daytona USA, but it works and you should play it. Now moving on to another 2D game, and another big viewer request that I can say 100% works is Super Puzzle Fighter 2. This is another awesome Capcom game. Yeah, we have it on the CPS2 core, but the Sega Saturn has different features and definitely something you might want to check out. And the best part about this one is not only is the sound perfect, but it's one of the best soundtracks Capcom's ever made in my opinion. So go ahead and listen for 30 seconds, but I'll be right back with a lot more games. That's just exactly how a real Sega Saturn should sound, and the Saturn always had really good sound hardware as well. But the best part about this is just it's replicating a real Sega Saturn. Now I have my Saturn hooked up next to me, RGB, into my 20-inch Sony PVM, and I get an absolutely spectacular image and experience out of that. But with the games on this list playing on MiSTer FPGA, I'm getting an exactly identical experience when I'm playing this. Some games just feel like the core is done, and I know I did a video on this, but a lot of people seem to be getting tripped up just because Sega Saturn isn't update all. They think the core is done. That is not in fact true. There's definitely still games that don't work and games that are going to have glitches, but the list of games that seem to be perfect compared to real hardware is growing every single core update and every single testing video, and there's so many games in the Saturn library. There's something for everybody, but this one right here is just another one where you can pick up and play, enjoy it, everything is working, and if there's any differences compared to real hardware, I would be hard pressed to identify any one of them, because this just looks, feels, sounds, and plays exactly like it should on real hardware. And that's the fun part. As more updates come, more of these examples are going to be able to be provided, games that just work. There's so many different games on the Saturn library, there's something for everyone, but if you want another game that you can play today, you're watching it right now. Now the last video I did Dungeons & Dragons Shadow over MiSTer, and everyone asked about Tower of Doom. I did have a capture for it. I was just holding off on it until we did the next testing video to not do 4 minutes of D&D beat-em-ups in a row. Now Shadow over MiSTer is definitely the stronger game of the two, but Tower of Doom is no slouch either. This is another game that just seems to work from start to finish, no issues whatsoever. From the 2D to the sound to everything else that comprises this game, I haven't seen anything in this capture or anything in my time playing it that would make me think there was any sort of visual glitches, and I have played this one a ton as well. And if you can't tell, a lot of the games that just seem to 100% work are Capcom CPS and CPS2 games that were converted over to the Sega Saturn. So it seems like at least with the coding, whatever Capcom was doing is 100% coded into the core, including the audio. One more sound sample and I'll be right back. Sounds like it should to my ears, but let's move over to Shadow over MiSTer again. I did show this maybe 3 weeks ago, but if you missed that video, this is another awesome beat 'em up. It's on the same compilation disc as Tower of Doom, and I do have it in my collection. It's a 2-disc set, and it's really fun to have on the shelf, but it has definitely gotten a lot more expensive as time's gone on. So having something like the MiSTer core, it's an incredible way to play these if you don't want to play the Capcom CPS originals, those Hotego cores we have on MiSTer as well. Definitely check it out and bring a friend. But the one winner of today's testing has got to be Mega Man X4. Not only is this one of the best 2D games on Sega Saturn in its genre, I cannot tell anything that this is doing that wouldn't happen on real hardware. That's how good the Sega Saturn core is getting on the games that do work. This is just, in my opinion, flawless. Now I'm not doing any comparisons. I will not run a real hardware comparison until the core is officially completed, but if I put this game next to my real Sega Saturn and compared them, I don't think I would find anything whatsoever. So if there's one game that you just want to sit down and play and know you're going to have an incredible time, you're going to have all the graphics, all the sound, all the action as real hardware, then Mega Man X4 is the one game of this list I recommend you play. I mean, honestly, I recommend you play each and every one of them, but if you just want to pick one, this one is going to be my recommendation for the week. But if there's games I haven't covered yet, leave me a comment down below and tell me what they are, and I'll try to make sure they show up in a new testing video. But Mega Man X4, 10 out of 10, seems to be perfect to my eyes, ears, and hands, but definitely check it out yourself. But that is the current testing slate for Sega Saturn, and these are all games I consider to be 100% playable and enjoyable today. And of course, as I test more games and get more captures, that list is going to grow. So if you like this format of games that just work without showing you games that work with glitches, let me know down below, because it is a slight pivot from what I'm used to doing. But don't worry, I'll be back with plenty more Sega Saturn testing. But if you have any ideas for MiSTer videos I haven't shown you yet, leave me a comment down below and maybe you'll see them in the future. Short of that, go play some Sega Saturn on MiSTer. See you guys next time. Bye bye.